The struggle is real. The early believers faced all kinds of humiliation, torture, and abuse. You see, the Quraysh knew they couldn't physically harm the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, much less kill him, because he was under the tribal protection of his uncle Abu Talib. There was one time, though, that when the Prophet was praying in front of the Kaaba, as he prostrated an evil man named Uqba, he threw his cloak on him and looked around. He thought he saw no one, so he kicked the Prophet in his neck. But Abu Bakr was walking up from the side and he came and pushed Uqba. What are you doing? Why would you kick somebody? Are you going to kill somebody simply for saying that my Lord is God alone? He pushed him, and then Uqba and his whole tribe started to attack Abu Bakr, and they began to really beat him bloody. And then Abu Bakr's tribe interfered and they broke it up. And they took Abu Bakr back to the house. Abu Bakr woke up hours later and they began to try to give him something to drink. He said, I will not drink or eat anything until I know that the Prophet is okay, peace and blessings be upon him. This was the love and devotion that they had. This was followed by warnings from the Prophet's tribe, Banu Hashim, and Abu Bakr's tribe. The Quraysh knew that they had to take a different route. So they began to torture and abuse some of the weaker Muslims, the poor, and those from a lower social status. There was a slave named Bilal. He was taken out to the desert by his master after telling him that there is only one God and one master, and I worship him alone. And so they tied him up and put a big boulder on his stomach, and they began to kick him and mock him, telling him to give up his faith. He would only say, my Lord is God, my Lord is God, God is one, God is one. The next day they put him in some armor plates, and so now his skin is burning. And he keeps saying, as they asked him, you better give up this new religion of yours. And he said, God is one, God is one. Abu Bakr one time walked by and saw that this is what they're doing to him, and so he paid Umayyah so much money to free him. Umayyah tried to mock him, saying, I would have taken half of that, and he said, I would have paid double. And so then he freed Bilal, and Bilal would later become a great leader amongst the Muslims and the man to give the call for prayer. To the extent when Umar became the great caliph, the leader, the second leader after the Prophet, when somebody challenged Bilal, he said, Bilal is my master, and he was freed by our master Abu Bakr. There was a young man named Ammar whose family had all converted to Islam, and shortly after that, they began to be tortured by Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl would mock them and beat them, telling them, you have to give up this new religion, you have to worship our idols. Because of the complex nature of this, they knew that they could not help him, because Abu Jahl was a tribal leader and he wasn't willing to sell them. One day the Prophet walked by and said, be patient, Yasir's family, our final meeting is in paradise. Despite the torture for weeks, they wouldn't give up their faith, and finally Abu Jahl stabbed Umayyah, Ammar's mother, and killed her. And then he began to kick her husband Yasir in the chest until finally he died as well. These were the first martyrs in Islam. Ammar later became a great leader and a pious Muslim and a scholar. There was another man named Abu Dhar. He comes from a tribe called Ghifar outside of Mecca. And his brother came back talking about this man who is claiming prophecy, and there is only one God, shunning the idols. Abu Dhar then traveled to Mecca and he wanted to meet him. And when he came into town, he asked about him, and they said, stay away from Muhammad. He has magical spells he puts people under. Of course, Abu Dhar, he rejected this. He went to go meet the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and he listened to the Quran and listened to the teachings of Islam. Immediately he embraced Islam. He told the Prophet, I want to go announce by the Kaaba as a man of honor to tell them my faith. The Prophet warned him this is not a good idea. Abu Dhar didn't care. He went anyways. And he announced his faith bold and loud. And then the Quraysh began to attack him until somebody stopped and said, look, his tribe may attack us and rob our caravans. So the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, began to look for a solution. He decided to approach some of the chiefs of the clans and try to reason with them and teach them one-on-one. Hopefully, if one of them accepted Islam, that would lighten the situation politically that the believers were facing. One day, while the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was explaining to one of the chiefs the teachings of Islam and telling him the Quran, an old blind man interrupted the Prophet and he began to ask questions. So the Prophet became annoyed and he frowned and looked at him and turned away. And then the other man turned around and looked away. And at that moment, the Prophet felt like something bad had happened from the blind man, but only to receive revelation that he was the one at fault. And so the beginning of Surah Abasa, the frowning man, referring to the Prophet himself, was revealed. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. He frowned and turned away when the blind man came to him. You never know, maybe he might become better for the Muslims, or at least he may take heed and benefit from good advice. So these verses of the Quran were reprimanding the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and teaching him the best of character, not to be bitter and turn away from someone. You never know, this person could be better than this so-called elder or noble among Quraysh. It was a beautiful lesson, not to look down on anyone and always see the best in everyone. Again, if anyone was in doubt, this is another lesson that the Prophet was indeed the messenger of God. Why broadcast and cement your mistake in scripture if you are making up a scripture to make yourself look like the great final prophet of God?